The skyscraper was a blade of glass and steel, piercing the stormy sky over Chicago. At its peak in the soundproof silence of his penthouse, Alexander Drake stood motionless, staring at the city's neon reflections bleeding across the rain-slicked streets below. A crystal tumbler of Macallan whiskey rested in his hand, the liquid trembling slightly, not from weakness but from the silent tremor that lived inside him. It had been 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days since the ground. Beneath his life collapsed, and the echo of that fall still rattled through his bones. The scent of polished mahogany and expensive leather filled the room. But beneath it lingered another fragrance, one that no cologne or air freshener could erase. The faint trace of Isabella's perfume, gardenias that haunted his every breath. Alexander opened the drawer of his desk, the action precise, almost ritualistic. Inside rested a single silver-framed photograph. Isabella laughing at the camera, her golden hair caught in the sunlight of a summer that would never return. He remembered the sound of that laugh. It was the only melody that mattered. His lips parted in silence, his thoughts forming a question he never stopped asking. Where are you? The answer was a grave on the outskirts of Long Island, 6 feet under, where Isabella lay forever beyond his reach. And there was only one name responsible: Christopher Hayes. The syllables were acid on his tongue. Christopher hadn't used a weapon, he had used the stock market. In one brutal sweep, he stripped away Alexander's family empire, Drake International, and left Isabella broken in the ruins. The Board of Ethics had called it aggressive market strategy. Alexander called it murder. While he buried the woman who had been his heart, Christopher Hayes grinned from the cover of Forbes, celebrated as a genius. The rage that lived inside Alexander was biblical, not corporate. It was an oath forged in fire. An eye for an eye, a soul for a soul. Alexander turned toward the panoramic window, pressing his forehead against the cold glass. Chicago glittered below like a chessboard, and he was the king in his tower. But he didn't feel like a king. He felt like a ghost haunting the ruins of his own existence. Every night the same reel played behind his eyes. The phone call from Christopher's smug voice speaking of collateral damage, the collapse of his empire, the silence that followed, and Isabella's death. He had carried that silence, like a curse every day since. And now, the time had come to break it. He returned to his desk and flipped open his laptop. Christopher Hayes's face filled the screen. Sharp suit, perfect hair, cold blue eyes, the smirk of a man untouchable. At 35, master of Hayes Consolidated. Alexander's jaw tightened. You destroyed my world, he muttered under his breath. Now I'll dismantle yours piece by piece. For years he had studied Christopher's life, dissecting every detail, mapping every weakness. And at last, he had found the single flaw in the armor: Emily Hayes, Christopher's twin sister, 25, an artist who lived in quiet seclusion in a Lincoln Park loft, far removed from the toxic empire her brother controlled. Alexander's private investigators had followed her to small independent galleries, paint-stained clothes, her hands and soul tangled in colors, her gaze lost in canvases. She seemed untouched by the greed and corruption of her family, fragile, and out of place in a world built on power. She was Christopher's only soft spot, the only person he shielded. And that was all Alexander needed. For the first time in years. A smile curled on Alexander's lips. But it wasn't a smile of joy. It was the smile of a predator who had finally found his prey. The plan crystallized in his mind, cold and merciless. He would find Emily Hayes. He would charm her, seduce her, make her fall in love with him with the blind, desperate force of first love. And when Christopher discovered that his precious sister belonged to the man whose life he had destroyed, he would feel the same agony that Alexander had carried for years. Emily would be shattered, discarded, and her pain would become Christopher's prison. It was perfect. He closed the laptop, the click sealing her fate. His eyes drifted back to Isabella's photograph. I promise you, he whispered into the silence, he will pay, even if I must sell what remains of my soul. The rain poured over Chicago in silver sheets. turning the streets into mirrors of shifting light. Alexander Drake stepped out of his black sedan and dismissed the driver, with a simple wave. His stride was steady, purposeful, every movement sharpened by the cold plan running through his mind. He was not wandering. He was hunting. It happened suddenly. A collision, the sound of cardboard hitting the wet pavement, books scattering, pages fluttering like startled birds before falling into the rain. A soft voice broke through the downpour. "Oh my God, I'm sorry." Alexander looked down. A young woman was kneeling on the slick sidewalk, dark brown hair clinging to her face, her hands desperately trying to gather the soaked books. Paint, stains colored her jeans, evidence of a life lived far from boardrooms and stock markets. She looked fragile, almost out of place against the harsh backdrop of the city. Emily Hayes. For a moment, Alexander froze. Inside him, an old, rusted gear screeched and locked. He had studied her, planned this meeting, anticipated every detail, but standing here now, seeing her in flesh and bone was different. She was real and fragile, and in that fragility, dangerously disarming. "Let me help." His voice came out rougher than intended. He knelt down, his expensive trousers soaking through as he reached for one of the books. Their hands touched, and the spark that shot up his arm was not metaphorical. It was real, static, electric. Emily lifted her face, and he drowned in the depth of her eyes. Brown, warm, and unguarded, they were unlike anything he had seen in years. "Thank you," she murmured, a blush rising along her neck betraying the calm facade she tried to hold. Alexander stacked the books, glancing at the covers. Renaissance art, poetry, history, pages marked with notes in delicate handwriting. A mind that lived inside beauty. "These are yours?" he asked, the question unnecessary but a way to keep her voice near him. "I was just coming from the library," she replied softly, standing, brushing rain from her clothes. "I guess I'm a walking disaster." For the first time in years, Alexander smiled, a real smile, uncalculated, surprising even himself. "Alexander," he said, extending his hand. "Emily," she answered, her hand sliding into his, soft, warm, almost trembling. In his mind, the cold voice whispered, "The plan is working," but another part of him, a part he had buried, wondered if it was. "What do you do, Emily?" he asked, his curiosity sharper than he intended. "I paint," she said vaguely, looking away as if trying to shrink into the rain. "A few things. Nothing important." He caught the hesitation, the instinct to make herself invisible. And without thinking, the words slipped out of him. "Let me buy you a coffee, to warm up." She bit her lower lip, an unconscious gesture that struck him harder than he liked. "I don't usually accept invitations from strangers. After nearly knocking each other over on the sidewalk, I'd say we're hardly strangers anymore," he replied lightly. Her laugh was low, genuine, a sound that cracked through the ice in his chest. "We're survivors, then." He nodded, that smile refusing to leave his face. "Exactly." "All right," Emily said at last, shivering in the rain, "but only because I'm freezing." The cafe was a warm refuge smelling of roasted beans and fresh bread. They sat near a fogged window. She ordered hot chocolate. He chose black coffee. Her gaze lingered on him, curious, searching. "You have a sad look in your eyes," she said suddenly. The words caught him off guard, direct, unflinching, like you've come from somewhere terrible. In less than 10 minutes, she had pierced his defenses. He choked slightly on his coffee, the truth pressing against his throat. "I lost someone," he admitted, the words heavy as stone. Her eyes softened. "I'm sorry. Me too. My parents, when I was a child. That's why I stay away from my family now. They're complicated." "Your family?" he asked, keeping his voice calm, even though his pulse raced. "My brother." She sighed. "Let's just say we don't agree on what's right or wrong." The name pounded in Alexander's chest. Christopher Hayes. It was real. It was happening. What does he do? He asked, careful, neutral. Business, Emily answered bitterly. The kind that crushes people without losing sleep over it. A chill surged through Alexander. She knew. She saw her brother for what he was. And yet, she carried the shame of his sins on her shoulders. They talked for 2 hours. The outside. World forgotten. When she finally stood to leave, he heard himself say almost desperately, "Can I see you again?" Emily hesitated, biting her lip once more. "I don't know if that's a good idea." "Why not?" "Because something tells me you're dangerous." Her voice was soft but certain. "Not in a bad way, just dangerous for me." She was right. More dangerous than she could ever imagine. "What if I promise not to be?" he asked. She gave him a small, knowing smile. "Can you promise something like that?" "I can try." She scribbled her number on a napkin, her handwriting delicate, but steady. As she turned to go, he called after her. "Emily, what's your last name?" For a split second, her eyes darkened with fear and shame. "It doesn't matter," she said softly. "Last names only carry the mistakes of others." And then she was gone, leaving Alexander with the napkin in his hand and the haunting realization that the most dangerous weapon in the world wasn't money or power. It was her. 3 weeks passed. For Alexander Drake, they were 21 days of silent warfare within himself. Each meeting with Emily Hayes began as part of his strategy, another deliberate step on his chessboard of revenge. A coffee in a quiet cafe, a walk through a bookstore in Lincoln Park, a visit to an obscure gallery in West Loop. He designed every setting to match her world, to appear as if he belonged to it. Every detail was rehearsed, calculated. And yet, with each encounter, the lines blurred. Her laughter, warm and unpolished, would echo in his penthouse long after she left. The way she tilted her head when something intrigued her, a lock of brown hair falling across her eyes, became a detail he couldn't erase from memory. He hated himself for it. He hated the weakness she created in him. Every time he returned home, he forced himself to stare at Isabella's photograph, to remember the vow made over her grave. This is for her. This is revenge. None of this is real. But the lie was beginning to feel transparent. That afternoon, Grant Park glowed beneath the autumn sun, the trees painted in fire and gold. Alexander and Emily walked side by side, their footsteps falling in rhythm over the gravel paths. For a while, silence between them was easy, natural. Then Emily spoke. "You never talk about your work," she said, nudging a dry leaf with the tip of her shoe. "And you never talk about your family." Alexander countered smoothly, the deflection instinctive. She smiled, but her eyes carried something darker. "Touché. My family is complicated. All families are. Mine isn't just complicated. It's toxic," she admitted softly, the light in her face dimming. She stopped by the edge of the lake, its surface reflecting a flawless blue sky. Her voice dropped, trembling. "My brother. He's done things I can't forgive. He hurts people, innocent people, and he never feels guilt. Sometimes I think I carry the shame of it, just for being his sister." Alexander's jaw clenched, his fists curling at his sides. Rage pulsed under his skin, not just against Christopher, but at the thought of Emily carrying guilt for his sins. He forced his voice low, urgent. "Emily, you are not responsible for anyone's mistakes except your own." The conviction in his tone startled her. She turned toward him, her eyes wide, her pulse fluttering visibly in her throat. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I know what it feels like to carry the weight of someone else's sins," he said, his voice breaking through the mask. For a heartbeat, he wasn't Alexander Drake, the vengeful CEO. He was just a broken man speaking to a woman who understood pain. "And I know you're different." The air between them shifted. Emily took a small step forward, closing the distance, her brown eyes searching his. "I've never—" She stopped, biting her lip, her voice trembling. "Never what?" he asked, leaning in so close he could hear the whisper. I've never given myself to anyone. I've never trusted someone enough. Her voice cracked with honesty, raw and unguarded. The confession hit him like a blow. The trust she was offering him was sacred, dangerous. Inside, nausea twisted with guilt. Monster, a voice inside hissed. Why tell me this? His voice was rough. Because with you it feels different, she admitted. You scare me and you calm me at the same time. I don't know how that's possible. He wanted to pull away. He wanted to remember the plan, but he couldn't move. Her presence pinned him. I'm not the man you think I am, he said hoarsely. A warning. He barely managed. Then show me who you are. And in that moment, all reason shattered. Isabella's face, revenge, vows, promises, they all dissolved into fragments of ice. He looked at Emily's lips, slightly parted, and he lost the war. His hand rose slowly, hesitantly, until his fingers brushed her cheek. Her skin was impossibly soft beneath his touch. You don't know what you're asking for, he murmured. Then teach me. Control disintegrated. With a force he didn't recognize in himself, Alexander pulled her close, one hand tangling in her hair, the other pressing her firmly against him. His lips crashed onto hers. It wasn't a kiss. It was a collision. He kissed her like a starving man, as though she were the first breath of air after years underwater. The warmth of her mouth ignited him, every nerve alive. Emily trembled, her hands clutching his chest, yet she didn't retreat. Her lips moved with his, tentative but willing, until the kiss deepened and consumed them both. Pinned against the rough bark of an oak tree, her body melted into his heart hammered uncontrollably, each beat thundering through her. Their breaths mingled in sharp, ragged gasps as his mouth devoured hers with desperate hunger. And yet, beneath the urgency, his hands trembled as though she might shatter. Emily moaned softly against his lips, the sound tearing through his control. The taste of hot chocolate still lingered faintly on her tongue, mixing with the wild sweetness of her. For her, it was terrifying and intoxicating. For him, it was the end of 3 years of silence, an eruption of everything he had locked away. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Alexander rested his forehead against hers, his eyes shut as if the weight of the world was pressing down on him. It's not okay, he whispered, his voice breaking. Yes, it is, Emily soothed, her voice barely audible. Her fingertips brushed his face, tender and trusting. Why do you fight this so much? He closed his eyes at her touch, as if it hurt to feel something so pure. Because I'm afraid of hurting you. What if I don't care about the risk? She asked softly. He opened his eyes, letting her see the storm inside him. You should care. But when she leaned in again, he didn't resist. He couldn't. Their lips met once more, sealing a fate neither of them could escape. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a sentence, a vow, a contract written in fire. And it was the moment that bound their destinies together, even as they stood unknowingly at the edge of an abyss. 3 days passed. 72 hours. 4,320 minutes. That was how long it took Alexander Drake to answer Emily Hayes's text. Every minute was a battle inside his chest. He had paced his penthouse with the Chicago skyline mocking him through the glass, trying to summon the ice of revenge, forcing himself to stare at Isabella's photograph, whispering, "Remember why you started this." But the memory of the kiss had burned too deep. The taste of her lingered on his lips, the sound of her moan echoed in the silence, and her warmth haunted him. Revenge felt distant. Emily felt real. Finally, he gave in. He typed a reply. Your place, Friday night. Her answer came instantly. Yes. One word, heavy with 1,000 unspoken meanings. Friday arrived draped in a gray, persistent rain. Alexander stood in front of the old brick building in Lincoln Park, his chest tight with anticipation and dread. The place was warm and alive, a stark contrast to his steel and glass world. He climbed the stairs, each step echoing like a heartbeat in the hallway. He shouldn't be here. He should walk away. But he kept moving forward. The door opened before he could knock. Emily stood barefoot in a simple navy dress that hugged her softly, her hair falling in waves over her shoulders. Candlelight glowed behind her, painting her like a masterpiece. Her hand clutched the doorknob tightly, revealing her nerves, but her eyes were filled with something far more dangerous. Hope. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi," he answered, his voice lower than usual, strained. Her loft smelled of turpentine, linseed oil, and faint florals. Canvases leaned against the walls, sketches in charcoal scattered across tables. Lit candles flickered, shadows dancing like living things. It was her sanctuary, her soul painted into every corner. "Did you paint all these?" he asked, his voice louder than intended, breaking the fragile quiet. "Most of them," she said, closing the door behind him. The click sounded final, like the sealing of a fate. She moved toward the small kitchen. "Wine?" He nodded, watching her hands tremble as she poured 2 glasses. Her movements were hesitant, charged. Every second between them thickened the air. "Emily," he said suddenly, his tone serious. She stopped and turned, the glasses trembling in her grip. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to," he told her, his voice rough but sincere. She set the glasses down and stepped closer. Her eyes were dark in the candlelight, her voice a whisper. "I'm scared, not of you, of myself, of what I feel when I'm with you." Her fingers brushed his cheek, feather light, yet it seared through him like fire. "I've never wanted anyone like this before, and it terrifies me." His chest tightened, the last of his defenses shattering. Inside, a voice hissed, "Monster," but her hand was warm, her gaze unguarded, and her truth undeniable. "Don't say anything," she whispered, placing a finger gently against his lips, silencing him. "Just stay with me tonight." His eyes closed, his body trembling with war. On one side, Isabella's grave, 3 years of hatred, the promise of revenge. On the other, Emily's scent, her trembling touch, her devastating honesty. When he opened his eyes, she was closer, so close he could feel her breath. "Are you sure?" he whispered, a final plea. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." And Alexander surrendered. His lips met hers, this time slow, reverent. His hands framed her face, tracing the lines of her cheeks as if she were fragile glass. She sighed into the kiss, her body molding against his, her hands pulling him closer. This wasn't the desperate collision of Grant Park. This was something deeper, more dangerous. This was surrender. "You're beautiful," he murmured against her neck, his lips brushing her skin. A shiver coursed through her. No one had ever touched her like this. Equal, parts tenderness and fire. He guided her toward the sofa, every motion deliberate, his eyes never leaving hers. He laid her gently down, his body hovering over hers, his control unraveling. "Alexander," she breathed when his lips brushed her ear. "Tell me," he whispered. "I love you." The words burst from her like a confession too heavy to carry. He froze. Her eyes shone with pure, unconditional love, and it nearly broke him. "You don't have to say it back," she whispered, sensing his torment. "I know you feel it. I see it in your eyes." He kissed her again, desperate to silence the guilt. His hands slid down her back, trembling as they found the zipper of her dress. "Are you sure?" he asked one last time, his voice breaking. The soft slide of the zipper filled the silence. The dress slipped from her shoulders like silk, her breath catching as she trembled beneath his gaze. He looked at her as though she were the most precious artwork ever created, his hands reverent as they traced her curves. "You're perfect," he whispered, his voice heavy with emotion. She blushed, warmth flooding her entire body. No one had ever made her feel so desired, so seen. The night unfolded like a hypnotic dance, a discovery of sensations she had never known. Every kiss opened a new world. Every touch ignited her soul. For her, it was a moment of becoming whole. For him, it was a terrifying rediscovery of love, each embrace a mixture of passion and guilt. When they finally joined, Emily's tears slipped free. Not from pain, but from an emotion too powerful to contain. "Is it hurting?" he asked, halting in fear. She shook her head, smiling through her tears. "No, it's perfect." He moved with care, giving her his strength, his gentleness, his heart. And she gave herself completely, body and soul, with no fear, no hesitation. For Emily, it was the night she became whole. For Alexander, it was the night he lost the ability to live without her. As dawn broke, she slept in his arms, her breath soft against his chest, her smile faint but serene. Alexander stared at her, his hand trembling as it brushed her hair. For the first time in 3 years, he felt peace. But peace was short-lived. Reality struck cold. Emily Hayes, the sister of Christopher Hayes, the instrument of his revenge. And he, the man who had just crossed a line from which there was no return. He had fallen in love with the weapon. A week passed. For Emily Hayes, it was a blur of colors and laughter, of happiness so intense it frightened her. For Alexander Drake, it was like walking a tightrope across an abyss. By day, he remained the ruthless CEO, cold and calculating, still moving pieces in his corporate war against Christopher Hayes. By night, he was simply Alexander, holding Emily, memorizing the warmth of her breath, addicted to the sound of her laughter. Each morning he woke beside her, and for a fleeting instant before memory returned, he would forget. He would forget Isabella's grave, forget revenge, forget promises forged in pain. For that brief moment, there was only Emily, her scent on his sheets, her hair brushing his chest, her smile in the soft morning light. But reality always crashed, back like ice water. Revenge, justice, vengeance. The words pounded in his mind like a creed, and with them came the guilt. He was living a lie, a beautiful, dangerous lie. That evening, he took her out, not to the polished marble halls of exclusive restaurants where deals were sealed with wine and signatures, but to a small Italian bistro in the West Loop that she adored. The air smelled of garlic, bread, and fresh basil, the sound of clinking glasses and soft laughter surrounding them. For Emily, it was comfort. For Alexander, it was foreign. He sat across from her in a tailored suit worth more than most patrons' monthly rent, but for the first time in years, he felt like an imposter. "Are you even listening to me?" Emily teased, brushing her fingers over his hand across the checkered tablecloth. "Always," he said, intertwining his fingers with hers. The contact sent a rush through him. "Liar," she laughed softly. "You were 1,000 miles away. I was thinking about you." The truth startled even him as it left his lips. A blush rose along her neck, her innocence intact even after their nights together. That innocence killed him and saved him in equal measure. The waiter approached with the check, but Alexander's attention snapped elsewhere at the sound of a too familiar voice. "Emily Hayes. What a surprise to find you here." The words cut through the room like a blade. The blood in Alexander's veins turned cold. He turned his head slowly and saw a man in an expensive suit, his silver hair slicked, his smile wide and smug. Other diners turned, drawn by his booming voice. Emily's hand trembled in Alexander's. Her face paled instantly, the color draining away as though someone had ripped the ground from beneath her feet. She forced a smile, brittle and tight. "Dr. Hemlock," she said, her voice strained. What a surprise. The man approached their table, oblivious to the tension he carried with him. "It's been ages since I've seen you at family events," he said loudly, his words echoing. "Your brother Christopher always asks about you." The name struck Alexander like a punch to the chest. Christopher Hayes. Spoken aloud, here, in this room filled with warmth and strangers. The sound was unbearable. Emily's shoulders tensed, her eyes flickered with shame. Alexander felt the air flee his lungs. His world, carefully built on lies and stolen moments, spun violently. He had planned for this, he had always known who she was. But hearing it, said aloud, connecting the woman he was falling for to the man he hated was too much. Emily's voice cracked under the weight. I've been busy. With work, with art. The man finally turned to Alexander, his eyes scanning the suit, the watch, the coldness etched in his face. And this must be... Ben, Emily said quickly, cutting in before Alexander could speak. Her voice shook, her hand clinging to his like an anchor. Just Ben, a friend. The word tore into Alexander like a blade. Friend. After everything they had shared, after the nights, the kisses, the love whispered in candlelight, he felt his control unravel. The man extended his hand. A pleasure to meet you. Alexander stood abruptly, ignoring the hand. Excuse me, he said sharply, his tone laced with steel. He turned and walked fast toward the restroom, leaving Emily alone in the center of the storm. Inside the dim, cracked-tiled restroom, Alexander gripped the porcelain sink, his reflection staring back from the mirror with bloodshot eyes. His chest heaved with rage, not just at Christopher but at himself. How could he have let himself drown so deeply in Emily that he forgot? How could he let himself believe the lie he was weaving? No, he had not been deceived. He had known from the beginning. Fate had simply forced him to face the cruelty of his own plan. He laughed bitterly, a sound that died in his throat. It was grotesque, perfect, in the most terrible way. Emily Hayes was the weapon. She had given herself to him, body and soul. She was innocent, and he was her destruction. And now, with her love in his hands, he had the perfect tool to break Christopher. His fists trembled against the sink. He closed his eyes and saw Isabella's face, her golden hair shining in the sun, her laughter ringing through memory. Forgive me, he whispered into the silence, but it's time for justice. When Alexander Drake returned to the table, Emily Hayes was sitting alone. Her face was pale, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She tried to smile, but it was fragile, broken at the edges. Ben, I can explain, she whispered. She, reaching for him. You don't have to, Alexander said smoothly, lowering himself back into the chair. His voice was calm, composed, the same tone he used to close hostile deals. You understand? Her voice trembled with relief, her fragile, hope clinging to his every word. I do, he lied. It must be difficult to carry a name like Hayes. Emily swallowed hard, her fingers twisting the napkin in her lap. You know my family? I know of Christopher Hayes, Alexander replied evenly, studying her face, every flicker of emotion. A powerful man. Influential. Emily's eyes filled. She reached across the table, desperate for his hand. My brother and I, we're not the same. I don't agree with the things he does, the lies, the deals that destroy lives. That's why I left home. That's why I live alone. Her tears finally spilled, running down her cheeks like glass threads. Alexander nodded slowly, each of her words piercing him deeper. She was innocent, and yet she was the key to destroying Christopher. Do you hate me now? She asked, her voice breaking. He looked into her eyes, saw love, fear, trust. He saw the heart he was about to shatter. No, he lied again. I don't hate you. You swear? She whispered desperately. I swear. Relief washed over her face, her tears softening into a trembling smile. I was so scared you'd leave, that you'd walk away once you knew. Everyone does when they learn my last name. Inside, Alexander's conscience screamed. For a moment he almost faltered. Almost told her the truth. Almost admitted everything. But then Isabella's memory cut through like ice. Her grave, her laughter stolen, her life destroyed, and Christopher Hayes's face smiling from magazine covers. The fire reignited. "I'm not going anywhere," Alexander said, his voice steady. And it was true, because now the plan was back, stronger, sharper, clearer. He would win Emily's trust completely. He would become her world. And when Christopher discovered that the sister he adored had fallen for his greatest enemy, Alexander would destroy her. He would shatter them both. The perfect revenge. "I love you," Emily whispered, clutching his hand tightly. "I love you too," he replied, and she believed him. She smiled through her tears, never imagining he had just signed her sentence. For the first time in his life, Alexander hated himself for lying, because now revenge had a face, and that face was hers. 2 months followed. Alexander became a master of deception. Every day he built Emily's world like an architect of illusions. Each word of affection was calculated, each gesture of care rehearsed. Every promise was poison wrapped in sugar. He woke beside her, memorized her warmth, kissed her forehead, whispered he loved her. And yet, in the shadows of his mind, another voice repeated endlessly, "This isn't real. This is a weapon." Remember that. One morning, as he knotted his tie in her loft bathed in sunlight, Emily handed him a cup of coffee, her smile tender. "Where do you go when you disappear at night?" she asked softly. He froze for half a second. "Work," he answered quickly, forcing a light tone. "Difficult cases don't wait for office hours." "What kind of work do you do exactly?" she pressed, curiosity glinting in her eyes. His jaw tightened. "Investment consulting. Incredibly boring, trust me." He kissed her forehead, hoping the gesture would erase the question. "Why the sudden curiosity?" "I just want to know the man I love better," she said with a small smile, though a faint shadow passed over her gaze. Alexander stroked her cheek. "You already know me. I'm yours." The lie slid easily off his tongue, though it tore at his chest. While Emily painted, her world filled with color and light, Alexander disappeared into darkness. His secret offices were filled with files, evidence, and blueprints for Christopher's downfall. He studied every move his rival made, every deal, every bribe, every crack in his empire. He was preparing for the day he would strike. But even as he plotted, Emily's presence gnawed at him. Her smile, her laughter, her innocent love threatened to unravel everything. She was his greatest weapon, but she was also the one thing keeping him alive. And with every passing day, the line between love and revenge blurred further. 3 months had passed since the night Alexander asked Emily to marry him. 3 months, in which his carefully crafted lie had become indistinguishable from reality. He woke beside her each morning and for a fleeting instant forgot everything. Forgot Isabella's grave, forgot his vow of vengeance, forgot Christopher Hayes. In that instant, there was only Emily. Her face softened by morning light, her scent lingering on his sheets. But the memories always returned. Revenge, justice, the promise he had carved into his soul. Each time it resurfaced, self-hatred grew inside him like a poison. He was a man split in two, lover and destroyer, husband-to-be and executioner. One morning, Emily lay on her side, her hair spilling across the pillow, watching him with quiet intensity. The pale light of dawn framed her face like something painted by the masters she loved. "Good morning," he murmured. "Good morning," she whispered back, but she didn't smile. Her eyes were serious, searching. "You were tense again," she said softly. "Even in your sleep." A chill ran through him. She could read him even in his dreams. He forced a weary exhale. "Work," he lied. "It's always work, always," she echoed, her voice thin. Her finger traced the line of his jaw, a touch both tender and heavy. "Ben, can I ask you something?" His chest tightened. "Of course." Her voice was careful, trembling. "Did you know my family before you met me?" The air froze in his lungs. His blood turned to ice. He fought to keep his face calm to hide the storm clawing inside. She knows. Why do you ask that? He managed, his voice even. Because whenever my brother's name comes up, she said, her eyes studying his face, you react. It's subtle. Your jaw tenses, your eyes harden like you know things I've never told you. It's as if you already knew him, before I told you who I was. Her words were knives, cutting through the layers of lies he had built. Panic surged. For a terrifying second, he thought about telling her the truth, about falling to his knees, confessing everything, begging for forgiveness, abandoning revenge. But then Isabella's face returned, her laughter echoing through memory, her grave cold and silent. Christopher Hayes's smirk in glossy magazines. The fire roared back. You're imagining things, Alexander said smoothly, his voice like silk. He pulled her into his arms, pressing a kiss against her forehead. I love you. That's all that matters. She hesitated, her body tense in his embrace. Then she nodded slowly, letting herself sink into him. But in her eyes he saw it. The seed of doubt had been planted. It was only a matter of time before it grew. Later that afternoon, Emily went out to buy new paints, leaving Alexander alone in the loft. He wandered through her world like a trespasser, paintbrushes soaking in jars, canvases leaning against walls, a worn book of poetry with her delicate notes in the margins. A photograph of her parents smiling in simpler days sat on a shelf. Everything about her life was honest, fragile, pure, and he was there to poison it. He paused before an old gold-framed mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. Where was the cold avenger? Where was the man of steel who had sworn to destroy Christopher Hayes? All he saw was a man torn apart, in love with the one person he should never have touched. His phone rang, the shrill sound shattering the silence. He answered quickly. Drake. On the other end, his right-hand man's voice was alive with excitement. Alexander, we got it. Proof of bribery in the Hudson Yards project. Christopher Hayes is finished. We can hand it to the feds tomorrow. The floor seemed to vanish beneath him. 3 years of waiting, 3 years of obsession, and here it was, the victory, the justice, the chance to destroy his enemy completely. But instead of triumph, panic gripped him. His heart pounded, his vision blurred, sweat slicked his skin. He was suffocating. Ben? Did you hear me? His associate pressed. I need to review the evidence first, Alexander rasped. Of course. But this is it, boss. We've got him. Alexander hung up, his hand shaking. His body trembled as if the truth had just struck him harder than any loss ever had. If Christopher was arrested, Emily would know. She would learn everything. She would see him for what he was, the man who had deceived her from the start. He would lose her forever. And in that moment, the shocking realization tore through him. He didn't want Christopher arrested. Not yet. He didn't want victory. He wanted her. He wanted to keep living in this fragile lie, this fragile peace, this love that felt more real than anything revenge had given him. When Emily returned, he was sitting on the sofa, staring into nothing, the phone still clutched in his hand. Did something happen? She asked gently, placing her bags down. Nothing. He lied. She sat beside him, warm and steady, her hands wrapping around his cold ones. You can trust me. Whatever it is, we'll face it together. The sincerity in her eyes nearly destroyed him. The confession pressed against his lips, desperate to escape. What if I had done something terrible? He wanted to say. What if I deceived you from the start? Instead, he kissed her with a desperation that frightened her, clinging to her as if it was the last time. I love you, she gasped against his lips. I love you too, he whispered. And this time, it wasn't a lie. It was the most painful truth he had ever spoken. Because now he knew. Emily Hayes had become more important than revenge. But the gears of justice he had set in motion were already turning, and he didn't know if there was any way to stop them. The first snow of winter fell over Chicago, blanketing the city in white silence. Inside her Lincoln Park loft, Emily Hayes lit candles one by one. the glow reflecting off her half-finished canvases. She hummed softly as she worked, painting, strokes of crimson and gold, unaware that the fragile piece she had built was moments from shattering. That night, Alexander Drake had stepped out for a call, another secret conversation, another lie he had to feed. He believed she was lost in her painting, but Emily had grown restless. Something inside her had begun to gnaw, a suspicion, a fear. She needed to know why the man she loved carried shadows in his eyes, why every mention of her brother darkened his face, why he woke some nights trembling with rage. She followed quietly, her bare feet padding across the wood floor. The loft was small, its walls thin. She could hear his voice clearly through the half-open balcony door. "Tomorrow," Alexander was saying into his phone, his tone sharp, businesslike. "We release the files to the feds. Bribery, offshore accounts, everything Christopher Hayes built will crumble. He'll be in prison by the end of the month." Emily's body went rigid. Her breath caught in her throat. Christopher. Her brother. The man Alexander hated. Her heart pounded as Alexander's voice continued, low and vicious. "This is what I've waited for. 3 years of planning, every move calculated. I told you, I'd destroy him, and I will, piece by piece, and he'll never see it coming." Emily stumbled back, her hand clamped over her mouth, her mind spinning. Her chest tightened as though the walls of the loft were collapsing around her. Every memory of him flooded back. The first kiss in Grant Park, the night he made love to her for the first time. The words "I love you" whispered against her lips. All of it replayed under the crushing weight of what she had just heard. This wasn't coincidence. It wasn't fate. It was a plan. From the very beginning, her vision blurred with tears. She wanted to run to him, to demand the truth, to beg for an explanation. But her body betrayed her. Her knees trembled and she crumpled silently onto the floor by the studio door, her chest heaving in silent sobs. Moments later, Alexander stepped back inside, shutting the balcony door behind him. He removed his coat, loosening his tie, his expression carved in steel. But when he turned, he froze. Emily was there, her face streaked with tears, her body shaking. "Emily," he whispered, the blood draining from his face. Her voice broke like shattered glass. "It was never real, was it?" His throat closed. He took a step forward, hands outstretched, but she flinched back as though his touch burned. "All of it," she cried, her voice cracking. "The coffees, the park, the nights, the promises. Was it all just a game to get to him? Emily?" His voice was hoarse, desperate. "You knew," she whispered, every syllable drenched in betrayal. "You knew my name from the beginning. You knew exactly who I was. You sought me out." Alexander's chest caved under the weight of her gaze. He wanted to say no, wanted to rewrite the past with a single word. But the truth hung heavy, undeniable. "Yes," he whispered. Her face twisted with anguish, the sound of her sobs shattering him more than any loss he had ever endured. "My God." He dropped to his knees in front of her, his hands trembling, as they hovered inches from her. "Emily, listen to me. It started as revenge, yes. I wanted to hurt him. I wanted to destroy him through you." His voice cracked. "But then I met you. I saw you, and everything changed. I swear to you, I love you more than I ever thought possible." Her tears fell like rain. "How can I believe you? How can I believe a single word you say when my entire life with you was built on lies?" "I would give up everything for you," Alexander pleaded, his voice breaking, his chest heaving. "The company, the plan, even revenge. None of it matters anymore. You're all that matters." But Emily shook her head violently, her body trembling. "No, it's too late. You've already taken everything from me." Her words pierced him like blades. He tried to reach for her, but she stood abruptly, retreating to the bedroom, slamming the door shut between them. Alexander sat frozen in the silence, his heart pounding, his hands shaking. The storm he had been feeding for years had finally broken free, And the woman he loved was standing on the other side of it, shattered, betrayed, unreachable. He had won his revenge. And in the same breath he had lost everything. The loft was silent. Too silent. Alexander Drake sat on the floor outside the bedroom door, his back against the cold wood, his head in his hands. His chest rose and fell in shallow, broken breaths. Beyond the door he could hear the faint sound of muffled sobs, each one stabbing through him like a blade. Hours passed. He didn't move. He whispered her name again and again, his voice hoarse, but the door never opened. When the first light of dawn filtered through the windows, Emily emerged. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hair disheveled, her face pale. She carried a small suitcase in her hand. Alexander pushed himself to his feet instantly. Emily, no, please. Don't do this. Her gaze was hollow, stripped of warmth, stripped of the light that once made him believe in life again. I can't stay, she whispered. Not after what you've done. He reached for her arm, desperation flooding his voice. Don't leave me. I swear I'll make it right. I'll stop everything. I'll destroy the files. I'll walk away from all of it. Just don't walk away from me. Tears filled her eyes again, but her voice was steady. You don't understand. You already destroyed me. You destroyed us. Everything I gave you, my trust, my love, my body, it was all real for me. But for you, it was a plan. I was just a weapon. No, he begged, shaking his head violently. Not anymore. It started that way, but it changed. You changed me. I can't live without you. Emily's lips trembled, her knuckles tightening around the suitcase handle. Then maybe you shouldn't have lied. Her words sliced him open. He staggered back, his chest heaving. Emily, please, he rasped, his voice cracking like dry glass. Don't let this be the end. Her tears spilled again, but she didn't falter. It already is. And with that she walked past him. Her steps were slow, hesitant, as though her body was screaming to stay. But her soul knew she couldn't. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded louder than thunder. Alexander stood in the middle of the loft, frozen. For the first time in years he felt true defeat, not in business, not in revenge, but in love. His knees buckled and he collapsed onto the floor where she had been standing moments before, his fist pounding against the hardwood in anguish. He had spent 3 years chasing revenge. And in one night, he had destroyed the only thing that could have saved him. Days blurred into nights. The penthouse, once a fortress of steel and glass, became a tomb. Alexander stopped answering calls. Meetings at Drake Enterprises were postponed indefinitely. He drank until whiskey replaced water, until he could no longer tell if the pounding in his head was grief or intoxication. The city outside his windows glittered as always. But to him, it was a wasteland. He moved through rooms like a ghost, his chest aching at every reminder of her. The faint scent of her perfume still clung to his suits. Her laughter still echoed in the quiet. Her absence hollowed him out until nothing was left. He opened Isabella's photograph again, staring at her, frozen smile. I did it, he whispered to the empty room. I destroyed him. But at what cost? His voice broke, the words crumbling into silence. I lost her, Isabella. I lost her. For the first time since her death, Alexander cried. Not for Isabella, not for revenge, but for Emily, for the woman he had loved and betrayed. And as the tears fell, he realized the cruelest truth of all. Revenge had given him nothing. Love had given him everything. And he had destroyed it with his own hands. Winter deepened over Chicago, the streets buried under snow and silence. For Emily Hayes, the days blurred into one another. She avoided calls, ignored friends, and drowned herself in her paintings. But no matter how many canvases she covered in color, nothing silenced the storm inside her. Then the morning sickness began. At first, she dismissed it. Stress, exhaustion, grief. But when days passed and the truth could no longer be denied, She sat trembling in her bathroom, a small test in her shaking hands. The word stared back at her, unrelenting. Pregnant. Her world tilted. Tears streamed down her face as she pressed a hand to her stomach. Inside her lived a piece of him, a man who had lied to her, broken her, destroyed her trust, but also a man she had loved with every heartbeat. She should have hated the thought. She should have cursed his name. But instead, her tears were mixed with something else, an ache, a fragile spark of hope. For the first time since she left him, she whispered his name. Alexander. Meanwhile, Alexander Drake was a ruin of the man he once was. His empire still stood, his fortune untouched, his enemies falling one by one. Yet none of it mattered. The penthouse was silent, his bed cold, his heart hollow. He wandered through endless nights staring at Isabella's photograph, whispering her name, trying to find meaning in revenge. But Isabella's memory no longer gave him strength. It only mocked him. Because no matter how many battles he won, he had already lost the war. One night, he found himself outside Emily's loft without realizing how he had gotten there. The snow crunched beneath his shoes as he stood across the street, staring at the windows glowing faintly with candlelight. He should have turned away, but he couldn't. Inside, Emily sat at her easel, her hand resting unconsciously on her stomach. When she rose and pulled a blanket around her shoulders, Alexander caught the faintest glimpse of her. Still beautiful, still fragile, still his. His chest tightened. For the first time in months, a flicker of life returned to his hollow heart. He couldn't stay away any longer. The next evening, Emily opened her door to find him standing there, snowflakes tangled in his dark hair, his face pale, eyes sunken. He looked like a man on the edge of death. Her body went rigid, her hand tightening on the doorframe. "Why are you here?" "I had to see you," he said, his voice raw, trembling. "Emily, please." She shook her head, tears already stinging her eyes. "You shouldn't be here." "I know I lied," Alexander whispered, his chest heaving. "I know I broke you, and I'll hate myself for it until the day I die. But I need you to understand. What started as revenge turned into love. I swear to you, I never wanted to hurt you. I only wanted him to feel the pain he caused me. But somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you. And it's the only truth I have left." Emily's tears spilled, her voice breaking. "You say, you love me. But love doesn't deceive. Love doesn't destroy." "You're right," he admitted, stepping closer, his voice shaking. "And I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I can't live without telling you. I'd give up everything. The company, the money, the revenge, all of it. I'd burn the world to ashes if it meant I could hold you again." Her sob escaped, raw and unrestrained. She wanted to slam the door. She wanted to curse him. But the sight of him, broken, trembling, begging, pierced her to the core. And then, before she could stop herself, the words tumbled out. "I'm pregnant." The world stopped. Alexander froze, his breath vanishing, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What?" "I'm carrying your child," she whispered, her hands clutching her stomach as if protecting it from him. "I don't know what to do, Alexander. I don't know if I can raise this child knowing the man I loved was my greatest lie." His knees buckled and he dropped in front of her, his hands clutching her trembling ones. Tears filled his eyes, tears he hadn't shed since Isabella's death. "Emily, my God, I swear to you I'll spend the rest of my life making this right. Not for me, not even for us." His hands brushed her stomach reverently, fearfully. "For them. For our child." Emily sobbed, her heart torn in two. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to run, and she wanted to collapse into his arms. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she whispered. "I'll earn it," he vowed, his voice breaking. "Even if it takes the rest of my life. I'll be here. Every day. Until you believe me again." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the howl of wind outside. Emily's tears slowed. She didn't move into his arms, but she didn't push him away. She looked down at him, broken, pleading, desperate. And for the first time since the betrayal, she saw something real, not the avenger, not the liar, but the man. And though her heart was still shattered, a single fragile thought bloomed in her chest. Maybe love could be rebuilt from ruins.